transsexualism after sex reassignment have considerably higher risks for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. Our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism and should inspire improved psychiatric and somatic care after sex reassignment for this patient group.
So again, this doesn't do anything to prove his point. It's actually going against his point, because again, it's saying that people who have gender dysphoria after sex reassignment surgery, they're way more likely to commit suicide than the general population. Again, it doesn't look at how they were pre-op. It just says that post-op, they were more likely to commit suicide, which again makes sense because gender dysphoria is an awful condition and it never fully goes away. You can't really cure gender dysphoria. And then in the conclusions, those researchers said our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, so it actually does work to help gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism and should inspire improved psychiatric and somatic care after sex reassignment for this patient group. So all that's saying is that, yes, sex reassignment helps, but it doesn't completely help. People should go to therapy after they have sex reassignment to further help them out with their issues. It's just saying that it's not the cure-all for gender dysphoria. That's it. That it still helps. It still works. It says right there in the conclusion, it still helps. It just says that it's not the cure-all.
Also echoing the research thus stated are pharmacotherapy studies that are 20 years old that used the drug Pimozide on a cross-dressing man with a strong wish to undergo a sex change. The outcome of the study, as far as I know, has never been mentioned in the mainstream media, or at least I've never heard about it between the cacophony of how Caitlyn Jenner is so brave and so beautiful. But there was an excellent response to Pimozide 2 milligrams daily with a cessation of both cross-dressing and the wish for sex reassignment. When, after 1 year, the dose was reduced to 1 milligram daily, there was a rapid return of the cross-dressing and the wish for sex reassignment. An increase in the dose again led to a remission, which has been maintained since then. And the conclusion was that pharmacotherapy with Pimozide should be considered in cases of doubtful gender dysphoria.
This is just evidence that Black Pigeon Speaks has no idea what he's talking about. He just has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. And this is part of the reason I wanted to make this video, because these people suggesting that Pimozide treatment will work for transgender people have no idea what the drug Pimozide actually is. Pimozide is what is considered a typical antipsychotic. It's on par with Haldol and lithium and Seroquel and that sort of stuff. And it just has very, very strong side effects. That's why they only give it to people who are so psychotic that they're going to hurt somebody. It basically gives you Parkinson's disease. It basically gives you the symptoms of Parkinson's disease because it sucks the dopamine out of your brain. If you're watching this, Black Pigeon, here's a little visual for you, okay? You ever seen the movie 12 Monkeys? Okay, well, there's a scene in which Bruce Willis has just time traveled and he's coming to try to stop the world from ending. This isn't a spoiler alert because it happened pretty early in the movie. Anyway, he gets in a fight with some people and he just seems completely crazy from them. They don't know that he's come from the future. So they put him on one of these antipsychotics. And let me show you the scenes here, okay? First of all, apologies for being a huge nerd. I don't know why I keep referencing Terry Gilliam movies. I mean, I really like his work, obviously, but he's not even my favorite director. My favorite directors are the Wachowskis, and for some reason I don't reference The Matrix enough. As you can tell, I'm massively geeky, but okay, here's the scene. Just take a look at this.
I work for the county. I don't work for the police. So my concern is for your well-being. Do you understand that?
Need to go.
I can't make the police let you go. But I do want to help you. So I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. Do you think you can do that, James? May I call you James?
James. Nobody ever calls me that.
Have you been a patient at county? Have I seen you someplace?
Not possible. I need to go. I'm supposed to be gathering information.
What kind of information?
Won't help you. Won't help anyone, won't change anything.
That's Pimozide. That's Pimozide. You idiot. You idiot. You want to put transgender people on that? Huh? Huh? Okay, I'll calm down. I'll calm down, okay? I know I'm referencing a sci-fi movie in this. It's like just a movie, but that's not too far from the actual truth. The reason why that person you were talking about, the gender dysphoria, came back is because she stopped being completely drugged up zombie. That's why it came back. And then when they put her back on the medication, she returned to that state. Don't you understand? Something is just not clicking in your brain, Mr. Black Pigeon.
But in all reality, this is one of those cases where you don't really need to appeal to scientific authority, as it's clear even enough to a layman to come to these conclusions. The real controversy, as I see it, lies with people that try to proselytize to the masses on the virtue, dignity, and right for individuals to choose the life of a transgender. This issue has become such that even transgendered people will now be allowed to compete in the 2016 Olympics without surgery, meaning that women with male genitalia will be allowed to compete against women with their original plumbing.
Okay, first of all, your genitalia don't really play a role in sports, but I do actually see a problem with transgender women being pitted against non-transgender women in the Olympics because transgender women do have an unfair advantage. It's true that transgender women do lose muscle mass after going on estrogen, but it doesn't change the size of the muscle fibers, and males have larger capacity, larger size of muscle fibers than females do. So I can understand why that's a problem. I can understand why transgender women would have an unfair advantage, and that would be something that would need to be dealt with. So I can understand that that's a problem, but again, like, he's freaking out the genitalia.
And now, even the US has joined most other NATO member countries and allows the transgendered to serve openly in the military. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi supported the elimination of rules that ban transgendered people from openly serving in the military, as she believes there is no place for discrimination in the U.S. Armed Forces.
What does this have to do with anything? Why do you care if transgender people are in the military or not? I mean, it doesn't seem like you like them very much, so wouldn't they have a better chance of dying if they were in combat positions or something? What's the issue here? What's the issue here, dude? I don't get it. If a transgender person wants to serve in the military, why do you want to stop them? What? What you say, what? He's just making no sense at this point.
Including on the basis of gender identity. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter overturned the ban on transgenders openly serving, despite the suggestion that transgender people may have mental deficiencies and be at risk for suicide.
Again, why is this an issue? I don't understand. I mean, yes, it's true that transgender people do have a harder life in general than people who aren't trans, and that sucks. And it's true that transgender people also have a much higher likelihood to commit suicide, but that's not the same thing as like having a physical disability, and that's why they don't want you to serve in the military. And even then, like, they're doing it for your own good. They're doing it so that, you're not at a higher risk of getting killed. Being in the military isn't going to necessarily do anything to the safety of transgender people other than, the normal risks in being in the military. I mean, maybe if it was like a combat position and a transgender person already had gender dysphoria and then they got PTSD from being in combat, I could understand like how that would be two disorders on top of each other, and that might be very dangerous to their mental health. But otherwise, I don't really understand where you're coming from, dude.
The fawning of the transgender has even become a cause to celebrate in children. One young male to female transgender girl, Jazz Jennings, even has his own television show at 14. And this is dangerous for kids that are having gender identity issues, as they see the media and social justice circus, as well as the unique snowflake label and attention that being transgender brings. And they may take the very real and very permanent body solution to a temporary and treatable mental illness.
And I can understand your point when it comes to transgenders, but to people who are actually transgender, they have dysphoria. They're going to try and treat that anyway. Now, I do agree that Jazz Jennings has kind of been catapulted into this huge media circus, and it's not really healthy for her. I can see why there would be a bunch of kids who think they were trans when they aren't. And so, yeah, I agree. You definitely shouldn't start transitioning until the kid's an adolescent. But again, I don't see what your point is here. How's this supporting your argument that transgender people shouldn't transition?
The American pediatrics colleges are now weighing in on the controlled media, social justice advocacy groups, and even President Obama, as they zealously champion the transgender rights for children and their push to normalize mental illness in the name of tolerance, acceptance, and diversity. On the 21st of March 2016, a temporary statement with references was released by the colleges, pending a full statement that will be published in summer 2016. The American College of Pediatricians urges educators and legislators to reject all policies that condition children to accept as normal a life of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex. Facts, not ideology, determine reality.
I would agree with you that facts and ideology determine reality, and I agree that the whole SJW movement is nonsense and it's an ideology and it's not reality. But that doesn't mean that transgender in and of itself is not an actual real thing. Again, you're conflating the two. And this is the problem with all of the transgenders. They make transgender people look bad. They make them look like it's the same as these kids who want to slap on labels that don't actually fit them.
This statement asserts human sexuality is an objective binary trait. No one is born with a gender-only biological sex.
You're going through these points so fast that it's hard to really respond to them. But yes, people are born with a gender. The brain is sexed a certain way at birth. That's why men and women have different brains. And that's what the gender is. It's not just an ideological concept. Yes, the whole gender identity, non-binary thing is an ideological concept, but not being transgender.
That a person's belief that he or she is something they are not is at best a sign of confused thinking.
Transgender people do not believe that they are the opposite sex. They just feel uncomfortable in the sex they were born as. They don't believe that they have the body of the opposite sex. Of course they don't. That's why they transition.
The use of puberty blockers can have serious negative health effects.
True, puberty blockers do have side effects. But which would you rather have compared to gender dysphoria? If it's determined that the kid definitely does have gender dysphoria, you have to start puberty before going to puberty blockers. It's not like they completely stop it before any puberty happens. That's done so the kid won't kill themselves, so the kid won't have to endure going through puberty because they have a neurological condition. Again, comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what transgender is.
And that conditioning children into believing a lifetime of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex is normal and healthful is child abuse.
Yes, when it's children, and yes, when you're convincing it it's normal. Yeah, that could be considered child abuse. But again, we're not talking about children transitioning. We're talking about adolescents and adults transitioning. We're talking about the concept of being transgender. Yes, there are people who, brainwash their kids into thinking they're transgender, and that's very, very sad. That doesn't mean that the whole concept of transgender, the whole concept of transitioning is invalid.
The story of teenager Rhea Cooper is especially tragic. As at 18, he's Britain's youngest sex reassignment patient. Formerly known as Brad, and after 2 years of hormone injections, he developed breasts, dresses in glamorous outfits, and has dated several young men. Yet despite thousands of pounds worth of National Health Service treatments, as well as psychiatric and doctors' assessments, Rhea has now decided he wants to go back to being a boy. And this decision comes after 2 suicide attempts.
First of all, yes, there are people who regret sex reassignment surgery, but those people aren't really transgender. They were given a misdiagnosis of gender dysphoria, and I think that, we should try to make it so that we know for sure if somebody has gender dysphoria so that stuff like this doesn't happen. But again, that doesn't disprove that some people actually do have gender dysphoria and actually do need those kind of surgeries.
And while 18 may seem young, there are examples in Germany of children as young as 12 going under the knife and being allowed to transition between sexes.
For some reason, I have a hard time believing this story that there was somebody who was 12 and allowed to have their sex reassigned. Like, how does that even work? If you're 12, you haven't finished puberty yet. Either Black Pigeon Speaks is misconstruing it to make it sound like this kid had a sex reassignment surgery, or this just didn't happen.
At this point in the presentation, if anyone is still clapping at the bravery and demanding transgender people have a right to sex reassignment surgery, I encourage you to visit the website sexchangeregret.com. It's filled with heartbreaking stories from people who have transitioned and might help you understand why suicide rates among these people are so astronomical. And if you still think that people are transphobic for not being comfortable with these procedures, or are so firm in your progressive credentials to even attempt to reconsider your ideology, then it might not be that you are a champion of human rights, but a blind automaton lacking empathy and a heart, and choosing ideology over reality. How is handing an alcoholic a bottle of gin humane? How is handing a drug addict an 8-ball of coke humane? How is giving these people expensive surgeries and hormones that further corrupt their already troubled minds humane?
I just wanted to let him talk for a little bit so that we could just see if he's making some valid points, because a lot of these do not do anything to support his argument. They seem like they're directed at people who already have his point of view, which it seems like it's the same for a lot of his videos, because they're propaganda. But anyway, first of all, again, transgender is not part of the SJW ideology. It's true that SJWs have kind of tried to encompass that, but that doesn't mean that it was invented by SJWs. It wasn't. It's been an actual thing. Sex reassignment surgeries have been going on since way before the SJW movement. And the difference between giving an alcoholic alcohol or a drug addict drugs and giving a transgender person sex reassignment surgery is that sex reassignment surgery is treatment for gender dysphoria. Drugs and alcohol are not treatment for people who have addictions. It doesn't do anything to help them. So it is actually humane because it's actual treatment, and it's the only treatment that's been proven to show that it works. Instead of Pimozide or something as equally extreme that doesn't do anything to help people, like the alternatives you're proposing are in no means any better than what has already been established in medicine as the treatment.
Real treatment is possible, but it involves treating the problem, not agreeing with the mental patient and everyone pretending that the voices are real. The key is to treat transgenderism as a mental illness and not to indulge it. You wouldn't hold a coke and sex orgy for somebody suffering from mania. You wouldn't hold a live-action role-playing game event for somebody in psychosis. You wouldn't hold a comedy roast for somebody in the grips of clinical depression. The same is for gender disorders. Don't indulge the mental illness by offering the quote-unquote cure.
A comedy roast for people suffering with depression? How does that make any sense? You've completely lost me here. Also, yeah, I agree that sex reassignment surgery isn't necessarily the cure. You can't completely cure gender dysphoria. That's just not possible with contemporary technology. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't treat it. Again, it's not indulging the disorder. It's true that gender dysphoria is a mental illness, but it also has a strong basis in neurology. And transitioning, again, is the way to treat it.
Of a transition or the possibility of identifying as your non-biological gender. Recognize it as the self-harm, as I said in the beginning of this presentation, as society does with anorexics or people that cut themselves. In fact, gelding a man to help him with his mental illness is like giving people with suicidal tendencies, but are seeking help, a gun, a pen, and a piece of paper to write their goodbyes.
No, it's nothing like that. Stop making these false equivalencies. It's not perpetuating their illness. It's helping treat their illness. It's not like transgender people still have the same level of gender dysphoria after transitioning. No.
Thanks very much. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, as we will be updating this channel often.
No, dude, I won't be subscribing. You're a complete and utter ideologue and a propaganda artist. I mean, I don't know if you consider yourself a skeptic because you criticize SJWs and other sorts of stuff, but you're not a skeptic by any stretch of the imagination. You're like 10 times worse than Hunter Avallone. At least Hunter Avallone is young and, was able to realize he was wrong and change his views on things according to the facts, but there's just no hope for you, dude. So, to conclude, he pretty much made very few points to support his argument. What he did instead was kind of mix the facts in with the propaganda. And, it's very misleading. Like, I can understand how some people might be misled by this. He says enough correct things for you to kind of believe, if you're not looking close enough, that what else he's saying is correct. But a lot of it does seem to be directed at people who already share his opinions, because, like I said, he's not making any kind of clear argument that makes any sense. He's just being very misleading. He's making all these false equivalences, which are just not true. And he's also conflating transgender people with SJWs and transgenders, which is a common mistake many people make due to the SJWs and transgenders ruining it for everyone. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.
Feel the funk blast!